All right, welcome Tactical Games community. We are here to recap 2021, talk a little bit about what's happening next year in 2022, and give you guys some breakdowns of how we felt, what we saw this year, things we liked, things we didn't like, favorite events, and hopefully come to you guys more often with more content like this. So hit subscribe on that YouTube button and join us for all of our content we got coming out. All right, first thing we're going to start out with is a recap of 2021. So what are some things that you guys feel went well this year and things that you guys enjoyed about this year that were different from 2020?
I think probably the first thing that was the most noticeable to people that have been around for a while is every event ran on time. I think that we had one event that was running...
The team event.
Team event running a little behind.
A little behind.
Unforeseen things there. But other than that, running on time, and then also a team event. I mean, it's the first time we'd ever done anything like that. And then not knowing how that was going to roll out and having 260 people, whatever it was, ridiculous amount of people there.
A lot of people.
Just moving that amount of people from one spot to another you think it would take 5 minutes and it takes 35.
Mm-hmm.
But I think timeliness was a big thing. Squad matrix, people knowing where to be and how to be. And we also started sending the stage descriptions out with the loadouts and all that stuff before. And I don't think, to me, at least as a competitor and as a match director, there was no really surprise lost other than instead of finding out 15 minutes before what you're doing, you find out Friday. Good luck trying to prepare. And if you did go out and think, oh man, they put a 200-pound bag in here, I need to go practice. If you went and practiced that on Friday, that was the worst decision you could make.
It's probably a detriment to Saturday.
Yeah, 100%. So I think those two things, everybody came a lot more prepared, knew what to do, knew where to be, how to be, what to bring, all that kind of stuff. So
I do think all of our videos that we put out on YouTube, I guess it was mid-year when we did that. Mm-hmm. But I think people were more prepared at check-in. They knew what to bring to check-in instead of bringing their entire gearbox. They brought just what was needed. I do agree that people showing up for events were more prepared. The stage descriptions, there was less questions throughout the year. Mm-hmm. I think things running on time was good.
Yeah.
That was a good change.
Physical preparation was something that I noticed a lot differently too this year than the years past. It seems like people in the athletic field are coming in way more prepared to meet the challenges that are ahead of them. People are starting to train with this as an intention. Mm-hmm. People are kind of mixing the modality of their training to fit this new thing that we're doing, right?
Sure.
Where in previous years, I think they were maybe not focused so much on the shooting aspect or not focused so much on the physical aspect and expected to come in and be competitive. I think now people are starting to realize you have to do both in order to be competitive very seriously.
Yep.
I mean, I can definitely speak to the fact that definitely in 2019 and most of 2020, you could certainly be a specialist and end up on the podium. Mm-hmm. You could come in and be a professional shooter and just have average fitness and get on the podium. On the other hand, you could be a professional athlete and not know how to shoot, and you're going to get last place. Right. So I think that the fitness has definitely, it's not a 50-50 thing. If it was a 50-50 thing, the results of the championship would have 100% been different.
Sure.
But I would say that we're closer to a 60-40 favoring shooting now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's with the intention that Tim had when he came in and created the sport. He always wanted, accuracy's final.
Sure.
And that was his intent. So that's what we're going to stick with. But I think we've definitely leveled the playing field a little bit to where if you come from a background of fitness, you're going to be able to come in and maybe not succeed, but you're going to be in the top 10.
Sure.
If you're a professional exerciser, we'll say it that way. Whereas before you didn't have a prayer.
Right.
You would, somebody that struggles to run a mile that outshot you would finish ahead of you.
Sure.
So I think we've done a good job of balancing the scales that way. And I think it's kind of misunderstood from some of the people that have been around since the beginning is now it's a fitness competition because they came in through the looking glass of the scoring, the way we would shoot 80 rounds and it'd be a 4-minute event, so it doesn't matter what you did physically in that.
Right.
But it's still, the proof is in the results, right? I'm not fitter than Hepner. I'm not fitter than Tim, and I think that it shows that if you can shoot, you can still win.
Sure.
And it definitely favors that stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how that progresses. But I think that we've hit a nice balance, at least in elite. And I think Jake, you can talk about it, but I think that we also found a really good spot for 40 plus, 50 plus, the women's divisions. For a minute there, we went too heavy with them. Towards the end of the year, we started pulling it back. And I think that we ended in a nice spot.
Yep, I agree.
And that spot is probably where we're going to be in those divisions for probably forever. But that was that, the reason behind the tactical division is to give the people that think, I'm in 40 plus and this isn't hard for me anymore. There's a place for you to go that doesn't have to take the huge step to elite. There's another place to go now.
And that allows red dots, so nobody has to ask that question anymore.
Exactly.
Goodness.
Yeah.
I do think, to touch back on stuff that went well this year, scoring and that being consistent throughout the year and penalties being consistent throughout the year rather than an FFI being tossed in at the will of a hat because we feel some type of way.
Right.
I think that even though some penalties seemed harsh when they were issued, if you shot a sequence out of position, it was the same across the board all year.
Yeah.
So I think that was a big improvement from years before.
And a little bit on consistency. So a lot of people throughout the year that went to multiple events had, I won't say a complaint, but a little bit of a gripe that there was a lot of similarity from event to event that they noticed. So maybe we could touch on that a little bit and why that happened and what the intention behind that was.
I think the biggest thing about that is, especially now we're spreading out across the country, right? And while there are a lot of people, which are regulars, which is awesome, that come to every event, we have to make sure the quality of every event is the same because for some people, that's the 1 or 2 events they can come to that year. So we can do literally the same event 10 times. And for 90% of the field, that's a unique experience, right? We do, and if you've competed, every event is very different, but the format is kind of the same. But that can be said about 3-gun.
Sure.
You run between 30 and 65 seconds for some people, and you run down a trail, you shoot targets, you're done, and it gets repetitive, and you just do that same thing over and over and over again. I think it's just the fact that we're in lanes.
Sure.
But that provides, which other people have talked about, the unique opportunity. In 3-gun, you're never able to race against somebody head to head down a jungle run event, right? You can do that in the tactical games. Really, the only thing that there was like that was back when 3-Gun Nation had the shoot-offs, and those were just, talk about repetitive. It was the same thing over and over again. But scoring consistency, if you noticed, we'll make small introductions of things in each event to try to keep the uniqueness going and the creativity going. We can't change everything all at once because a good example is in Arizona. One of the guns went down on a stage where you were earning points. Well, we have a way to solve that problem where if your gun goes down on a regular style event, every shot you didn't take is a miss, plus a 10-second penalty per shot because you didn't spend the time shooting. Right.
Correct.
We learned that from the previous championship,
right,
where a gun went down, they didn't take any time shooting, and they would have gotten 4th on the stage.
Right.
So that's why we add the additional 10 seconds per shot not fired for the time you didn't spend firing. However, we were in a new format. It's the first time we had done the 2-part stage that lasted 24 minutes. You earned points, but we didn't have a rule in there for what happens if a gun goes down, right? There was a legitimate, it was brought up to us about it afterwards. It's like, that's a hole. and we got to plug that hole. Mm-hmm. Now imagine if we would have done 3 new things during that event and learned 3 things. Now we have a big scoring problem on our hands. So that's why you have to make incremental changes and fix the small problems with each change, so it's not just a disaster over the weekend.
Sure.
We spend 16 hours in the truck on the way trying to think of holes in everything that we've designed. Try and think of holes, try and think of ways so you can game it, try and think of everything. And you show up, do the event, 5 minutes after event, somebody walks up to you and is like, hey, XYZ happened. And you're like,
right.
I never could have foreseen, somebody's gun going down, then coming back, and then they threw a bullet at the target and hit it. You can't think through everything.
But we were lucky enough to have 200 use cases by the end of the day that proved out, hey, this went well. There was one hole in it. Here's how we can make it better for the championship, which we did. And I think at the championship, that turned out to be the best event.
I was going to say, that was probably everybody's favorite event from the consensus that I see.
Like movement standards, introducing new movements, the burden is on the judge, right?
Right.
And the rep, no rep thing is something that we had, everything, if people haven't noticed by now, everything that we do has a verifiable standard.
Right.
You should be able to see it from the stands. It is not something that is judged from up close.
So on a burpee, we don't just do a burpee, right? At the bottom, you have to lift your hands up off the ground.
Right.
Like you are on the ground now. Your hands aren't touching it. Then at the top, there is no jump and clap at the top. At the top, you're going to hop over a bar, or you're going to
put a sandbag over a bar.
Put a sandbag over a bar, something, because now you have verified that I've stood up and I've done something completely standing up, and then you fall back down to the bottom and lift your hands to the top. Sandbag over bar, right? Like that kind of takes the place of a clean and jerk, but you don't have to have somebody judging if you locked out at the top and if your hips, if you still had muted hips or whatever, you got the bag over the bar, check.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Rep complete.
Sure.
Right. So everything has a verifiable standard. And if you go back, I don't think a whole lot of people understand that the way we set the bar height on the yoke is we looked up the average military truck, how high their bed is, right? That's how high the bed is. That's why we're using that height.
Yep.
So it also has real world applications.
Sure.
In real world, you don't have to lock it out. You just have to get it over or on top of, or, whatever. So, I think it applies to the real world a lot better. It's also a lot easier to judge, and it doesn't put a burden on a volunteer to look at somebody and say no rep.
Right.
Because some people have that confidence, some people don't.
Sure.
So,
and the judging consistency across events all over the country with different judges that are coming in volunteering for a weekend is super important for people that are trying to qualify for a national championship or expect the same result from Arizona to, New Hampshire or wherever the event was.
Mm-hmm. And I think at the championship on the 24-minute event, I think there was, which some of the comments I got back was like, hey man, I don't know about this athletes, counting reps for the athletes behind them. What they didn't understand is we had 2 judges watching, making sure, and basically the athlete was confirming the score that the volunteers had, right? So the athlete that was keeping score was confirming that other score that we had. Mm-hmm. The other thing that they were kind of admitting without admitting it is, damn, it is hard to be a judge, right? Because all I had to do was sit here and click this thing when they went over the wall and click this thing when they tapped it. And for 5 minutes, I forgot to do it. And I had to go back, and how many times did we go back and forth? Well, this guy and that guy didn't lap each other, so they were on the same lap, and they all figured it out. But they also had the opportunity to learn, like, hey, this judging thing isn't exactly easy, right? But it was probably the easiest thing to judge all weekend. So I think that there was a lot more respect for, the volunteers that are out there judging after that event.
I think I can agree with that.
And a big thank you to the volunteers too. All year, it was impressive to see everywhere we went. We had a great set of volunteers that came out. They were always happy. They were encouraging, stayed late nights and worked their butts off. So thank you to everybody that volunteered this year. That's cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, big time.
The going into 2022, and a lot of things, and it kind of speaks back to being able to do different and unique things during the events, is judging for the group behind you is going to become a thing. Yep. I liked it when I was competing, like at the championship. A guy named Daniel was behind me. I got to meet him.
Right.
You know, like after that, we talked quite a few times. So I met somebody I previously probably wouldn't have talked to.
Sure.
The other thing is it keeps you engaged in the event. There's more people around cheering because people just start hanging around watching, you know, because they're interested in it. That, and in every other shooting sport, like, you know, I shot 3-gun for a long time, and USPSA, the same applies, probably more so. You spend 10 hours a day resetting targets, and you spend probably, you know, shoot 4 stages in a day. So you're going to spend 2.5 minutes shooting and 9 hours resetting. And you are working all day long. There is no going back to your truck to eat and take a nap and all this. You are working all day long at every other professional shooting organization on the planet. All that we are going to be doing is that group right behind you, you're going to keep score for. One, that relaxes our stress on trying to get enough judges there. There's still, then the other thing that's going to allow is we're going to be able to bring in experienced judges, have less of them, but they have a lot more experience that can help catch things as they're going on.
Right.
It's not their first time there. So they can help, hey, if something's going on, they're going to see it because they've been there before.
Correct.
Then they can immediately correct it and they can help the battle boss. So that'll allow us to bring in, you know, more experienced volunteers, not be so much concerned about the number of volunteers. But then also we're always looking for volunteers too.
Sure.
So, but I think that, you know, that'll be a solid change going in. And if you think like, oh man, this person isn't going to count for me right because this, that, and the other, you know, there's going to be people watching.
Right.
Like if you think you're going to get away with something, you're not going to.
Right.
You know, you're not getting away with anything.
Well, and at some point, that person's probably going to be judging you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Come back full circle.
Because we burn heat, so
yeah.
watch your back.
Right.
So you touched on it a little bit. I'd like to get into it a little bit more. We saw towards the end of the year, spectator attendance just blow up. And I think that part of that is the format and how things are maturing, and it's becoming a sport that people want to come and watch. We hear people all the time on different social media channels asking us, how are we going to get this content out there? So if you guys haven't noticed, we've started to put more of it out there on YouTube at people's requests. So let's talk a little bit about spectating and some of the joys of that.
I mean, I think I had competed 4, 5, 6 times before I ever came and volunteered and helped Tim as a match director. And that one time that I spent there watching, and, you know, I was being a match director, so I had to go around and make calls and stuff like that. But I spent a whole time watching, and I learned probably some of the most important things about competition while I was there watching. I started timing people doing things, finding, you know, that easy, low-hanging fruit to start practicing in those time frames. And I found out how to make up a lot of time on people without having to be any more fit or shooting any better. And I think you can also save yourself a ton of money by going and watching, because I think you see the newer guys come into the sport and they have thousands of dollars worth of stuff that they don't need.
Right.
I think that I probably compete with the cheapest setup. I mean, my holster's like $35, my belt's $14, and my pouches all combined were probably $100.
And that hasn't really worked for you this far. So
yeah. Yeah. And so that's, you know, and I think it's pretty eye-opening to see for people to come and see the top elite guys are carrying nothing that they don't need. Right. Like I don't even wear a hat. You know, that's as basic as it is. Wearing shorts, a t-shirt, the exact amount of pouches that I need, my rifle and my pistol. Right. And I think that's also important to kind of speak back to the tactical division where, you know, we're not going to have requirements, because I can even, that's a separate podcast in and of itself. Like what would you actually need to bring to be quote unquote tactical, right? So we're not going to have like clothing requirements. And I mean, the rules would be 500 pages long on that. But that is creating a division where you can come in and you can use your duty setup. And more than likely, most of the guys in that division are going to have their duty set up as well. Right. So it's kind of, you're not feeling obligated to become part of the elite division where you're wearing workout shorts, a t-shirt, and, the most minimalistic stuff you can get away with because you don't want stuff getting hung up on things.
Yep.
But I think there's also another lesson in there that a lot of people could probably pick up on. But other than that, what do y'all got?
Well, we talked a lot about the things that went well this year. Let's talk a little bit about the things that didn't go so well. So, over the 12 events that we had this year, there were some things that, we learned from, we grew from. What are some of those things? And, what do you guys see? How are we going to fix those things going into next year?
I would say one is, it was something that kind of started showing itself when we started changing the arbitration process. Clearly communicating that at the beginning of each match. However, the reason why it was never part of the official rules is because if nobody's noticed, nobody reads the rules anyway.
Right.
But the other part is the guys that do aren't rereading them before every match, right? So we do one rules update per year. The current rules that are on there state the arbitration has to happen immediately, right? And that's on the rule book.
Yep.
That you go get, if you're not happy with the call, you get it done. And every other shooting sport, you hit approve on that tablet. And when you hit approve on the tablet, it is over. It doesn't matter what videos you have. It doesn't matter whatever. It doesn't matter what you say at arbitration at the end of the match. It is over.
Right.
And if you signed and hit approved on a time that was 3 hours instead of 30 seconds, you got a 3-hour time.
Right.
Nobody cares. And the arbitration process, we're never going to go to that. Why? Because our scoring is so much more complicated with fitness and shooting combined. Right. There are scoring problems in USPSA and there are scoring problems in CrossFit, right? In CrossFit, it's literally counting reps and writing down a time, which seems so simple, right? But it still gets screwed up.
Yep. There are scoring problems in the NFL where they have instant replay and it still comes back. You can have 17 different camera angles that explain, here's exactly what happened. Outside observer sees something different, and the call doesn't always go that way.
Exactly. So we're definitely going to refine that process and make it more verifiable on when things happen and when things don't happen. And, I think we made it clear throughout the year that there's an arbitration process before awards. If that arbitration, if you go beyond that arbitration process, yes, we're not saying we're right. You can be 100% correct in your assessment of something. We aren't changing it, right? So if you come back next Friday and say, hey, I have this proof that X, Y, Z happened. It's like, yeah, you're right. And I'm looking at this proof and I can understand your frustration that, this isn't correct. However, we're not changing it.
Right.
We're not going to get in the business of 3 years later, somebody coming with a cell phone video and saying, hey, look, this guy wasn't in a kneeling position. His butt was touching his leg. I should have won.
Hey.
And we're not getting in the business of that.
Yeah.
And there's going to be definitely some people that have hurt feelings over that. But the thing is that I can attest to the fact that there's not everything is going to go your way.
Sure.
Right. There's certainly something at the championship that 100% did not go my way. There's probably some other stuff that did go my way.
Sure.
Right. So at the end of the weekend, you can sit there and dissect everything and go find yourself a hit or 2 hits or 3 hits or this happened or this other person didn't do anything. Let's talk about what went your way for just a second and how it equals out at the end of the weekend. Mm-hmm. However, what we do want is that margin to shrink to close to zero as possible.
Right.
And it's never going to happen. There's the best laid plans where we can put them out there and try and get our scoring perfect and try and get the judging perfect. And you could hire somebody and pay judges $50,000 a year to show up to 3 events, do nothing but study how to be perfect on being a tactical games judge. Somebody's going to screw something up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like strikes and balls in baseball. You can go look at that pitch 1,000 times and scream at the umpire the next Tuesday and say that was a ball, not a strike, and this would have changed the course of baseball history. But guess what? Sorry, bro.
Right. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Another thing that we, I won't say heard complaints about, but people were maybe a little bit confused about was we started it at GTI squatting right before the event starts on Saturday morning.
Yeah.
So maybe a little bit about that. See, there was some confusion. Not everybody knew what was going on. Why did that happen, and why are we going to continue to do that next year?
So GTI, we had, I think, 208 people originally signed up. It was getting later in the year, so daylight savings time change. It was getting dark at, I think, 6:15. Yeah, 6:15, about that time of year. We were going to be shooting in the dark. I texted Jared and was like, hey, man, this matrix doesn't work. And we looked at it 3 or 4 different ways, and we had a plan B. But one thing we decided to do is when everybody checked in on Saturday morning and right at the end of the safety brief, we started re-squatting people to condense squads. It was a little bit chaotic, but I think that, one, there was full heats all day, which was cool. Rather than running a heat of 2 and then the group right behind it's a heat of 3. And then the battle boss is sitting there wondering, like, why can't we just combine heats?
Yep.
But for those that
Which
don't know
turns
why we
into
don't,
a complete nightmare.
But for those that don't know why we don't do that, it's just scoring issues, and then athlete numbers get mixed up, and before you know it, it is a absolute scoring nightmare. So
for those of you who've been to an event when scoring is still happening at 9:30, it's because somebody combined heats, and we had to go back and redo scores for 4 hours afterwards.
And 2 14s in the lane right next to 116.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So we just decided to re-squat everybody in the morning, and I think that got us well under what we needed. I think the max of what we were going to be able to shoot if we didn't have to go to plan B was 12 squads or 12 heats per battle group, which is a total of 36 squads. And I think we only had 30 squads or 31 squads.
We cut 2.5 hours off the end of the day.
Correct.
By taking 10 minutes to re-squad. I think it was 11 minutes to re-squad. We were running 11 minutes behind when the first shot had left every event every stage that morning. But
that was made up during the first battle change between group 1 and group 2. We just shortened that break by 11 minutes, and everybody was back on schedule.
Right. So that's the so the reason why we are doing it is one of the complaints that we've gotten is that, hey, we're doing 3 events of the year and there's 2.5 hours between each event. Well, we're going to take that 15 minutes after the morning safety brief to regroup people, because that'll also shrink that wait time by 30, 45 minutes.
Sure.
It also allows us to lengthen events, right? So our plan B that you were talking about earlier is we're going to chop the times from 12 minutes to 9 minutes, to get everybody through that weekend. Which we didn't want to do.
Right.
It's sacrificing the quality of the event to run more people through, and that's wrong on a lot of levels. Right. They paid for what they came to expect, and we're not going to chop it off by 20%, 25%. So it's a little chaotic. I would say it's chaotic from the perspective of the competitor, but from the perspective of the battle bosses and the match director that know what's going on, it's not chaotic.
Right.
Like we know what's going on. And at the end of the day, that's all that, as long as you're standing in the right line and you understand that you're lane 3 and like you were kind of confused while it's happening and you may not know, by the time you're done with your battle brief at your first event, you now know what it is. You now know where to be. You've looked and you found yourself on the schedule. You know exactly when to be back, and it's all done. And we've shortened the day by 2.5, 3 hours.
Also, you're not getting back to your hotel room at 9:00 at night anymore.
And a lot of times people come because it's also a social event for friends to get together, and you can go to dinner that night.
Yep.
You're not sitting there seeing spark off steel because we're shooting so late. And now you can't go eat with your friends and you're tired and you have to go back to your hotel and might not even eat dinner. Like that was 2019. We're done with that.
Right.
That's, I would just hope that people find comfort in the fact that it's a little bit chaotic from the competitor standpoint, but from our standpoint, we know exactly what's going on.
But from a competitor standpoint, no one's gotten lost since we've started that.
One person at GTI.
Well,
because they didn't follow the instructions.
Are you talking about Nate getting lost at GTI?
No, Nate needs to learn how to Nate needs to go to NASCAR where they only turn left. But anyway, that I think that GTI, going back to talking about the good things, is this year I think we had 3 people get lost in the building.
Yeah.
And I would say the year before that, it was probably 20%. And the year before that, damn near everybody.
Right.
So
Fire Rescue had to come out this year, which is a huge
that's
plus.
always a positive.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. So I would say that it was actually it's a huge win. And when we're going back to GTI, I think that we have found a way that if you get lost, you should probably sell it. You don't need to
just walk home.
Don't try to drive home. You don't need to drive in a car. You need somebody to walk with you everywhere all the time. So but I think we found a way where 0 people are going to get lost. So
I think over the course of the year, most of the run events were better as far as like people getting lost.
Yeah.
I mean, we had one in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And then that's really all I can think of.
Yeah. Yeah. Which New Hampshire was marked well. I mean,
sorry, Darius, bro. You took a hard right.
I ran it. Kirk ran it. We all ran it beforehand.
Yeah.
And so, but other than that, I think logistically we're getting a lot better. We're getting the setup system down to where we've condensed the amount of time it takes us to set up, which for a lot of people that wonder like why we don't have this big Spartan type experience, right? We have the range. We're lucky to be able to start setting up Tuesday afternoon because the public is still using the range. We get the heavy stuff put out where it's supposed to go Tuesday afternoon. Wednesday is sometimes we actually get the range, and then sometimes we don't. Right. Sometimes we're still marking long run courses and doing everything we can outside of the direct Bay area. Thursday is usually the first day that we truly have the range to start doing things, and sometimes not everything. Right. Like sometimes they're not letting us into the bay, but we can like put all of the heavy stuff in the bay, just not set it up. Right. And if nobody's in there, we can spray paint the ground and stuff like that. But we don't have it, because guns are involved and we have to be doing it in bays that range have to be making money off of every single day. We don't have the luxury of showing up to a mountain with trails that are people running on and having 4 weeks ahead of time to set up.
Right.
And, the other thing about it is since there is guns involved, we can't just launch 120 people that are all paying, $150 to run the race. So that there's budget constraints as well that we have to work within. Just there's guns involved. So there's a minimum, in order to be safe and keep a respectful eye on everybody, there's a certain number of people that we can get through that allows a certain budget with us to work within. And that's why, you saw things at the championship that aren't going to be replicated again throughout the year. It's 30 minutes away from the range that I own. It's 30 minutes away from where we keep everything. But me and Jake both live here, so it's not like we had to send Jake somewhere 3 weeks ahead of time because that's about when this started being constructed.
Right.
I took 3 trailers to RPR and all 3 were on site 12 days before the event.
Right. And that's the stuff that we take. There's 16,000 pounds of stuff that have to be moved off of truck and put back on a truck every event. And largely, I would say 90% of that's done by Jake the week before.
Right.
If you haven't noticed, we go into like full panic mode to get everything loaded back onto the trailer and truck the second the last shot is fired in each bay. And it's because we have about 15 minutes of where the people that are competing will stick around and everybody grabs 1 or 2 things and we can literally get everything put back into the truck in 45 minutes, right? As long if we're on it. If we miss that window, we're there on Monday till midnight.
Right. So for those of you that see me panic and have felt that, that's why.
Right.
It's because I don't want to do it again alone for the next 4 days.
Right.
I just did that to set it up. So I appreciate y'all's help putting that up.
in 45 minutes, we get done what is going to cost us 12 hours the next day.
Right.
So, but I think we're definitely getting a lot better at that, which the more efficient we get means the more things we can start doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely a positive.
So let's touch a little bit on what everybody's favorite event of this year was the favorite 2021 event.
Like big event or individual battle?
I mean, I've got mine. Favorite, it's like whole event. Favorite
whole event? I think for me, personally, New Hampshire was an absolute experience. It was a whirlwind getting there. I think I had 3 or 4 blown tires. I had to go pick up ammo in North Carolina and then drive up, which added like 4 hours on the first leg of the trip, or 5 hours on the first leg of the trip. Going up into the mountains up in the Northeast, I've never been up there, so that was pretty cool. For those that have never been there, there's hills that go on for like 3 or 4 miles at a time. You're going up and then down. And then that event itself was a unique event. I think New Hampshire was probably my favorite one throughout the year.
What about you?
I really liked Arizona. Not so much. I mean, the backdrop was awesome, right?
Yeah.
And then just being there, I've never been to Arizona before, so it was cool to see all that stuff. But then I guess the atmosphere in Arizona was probably one of the better ones. I think having the overhangs at each bay, people came and hung out and watched everything that was going on. Everything was in a condensed space, so everybody was always in the same area, and the event was a good event. We had good battle bosses there. I think that was the first time we had done the aggregates as well. Maybe the second time. GTI was the first time. Mm-hmm. Doing the aggregates, and then we did the same aggregate back to back, which was kind of unscheduled, but it was cool to see how much people improved the second day. Some people improved the second day, but I would say largely people improved on the second day. So
the energy at that event was definitely different than any other event that I'd been to, and I've been to quite a few of them. It was cool to see the spectators and people cheering for one another, which has always been something that's part of the community. Yeah. But seeing more people involved in that was really, really cool.
I don't want to leave out Meridian.
Meridian's always awesome.
Because the heavy hitters that were there, we pulled out some big weight. It was stinking cold and wet. Goodness gracious, that was awful.
The 1 minute event in that, where it was the running over the fences with a bag, that was cool. That was one of the coolest events of the year.
I think that was the first time we brought in floaters.
That was the first floater.
They had done floaters like in the first tactical games ever or whatever, but I've heard that it was kind of rough. Some movement standards were involved, which is why we don't do that. Yeah, I think that's the first time we brought in floaters to kind of compensate. Yep. And that's if there is a physical floater around an event, it's because we've designed all 6, realized that there's a hole in the programming that we need to fill, and we fill that hole with a floater. Which, there we obviously, there's 2 events there that just kind of crawling through tunnels, which is, we're gonna do it. If we're there, we're 100% going to do it because it's an awesome experience. But then that also is really hard to make up for in programming for the overall weekend.
Sure.
So. I feel like you guys missed the low-hanging fruit. The team event was the best event of the year. The team event was awesome. It felt like everybody was there. We saw some really, really cool teams. We saw a couple mother-son teams, which I thought was really, really awesome.
Husband-wife teams, which
there were some inner workings there that were interesting. But it was just really cool to have everybody in a brand new place that we'd never been before. Mm-hmm. Panthera was a really cool range. Yeah. And it was a brand new format, so things ran a little bit later, but there was a ton of learning experiences for that as well.
Just like we normally plan 30 minutes from the end of the battle group to the next battle brief. Right? It's usually 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. And we needed an hour between each one. Yeah. That was a huge learning experience. But obviously, even on the way home, we talked about several things to improve that immediately going into next year. But that one was a good one.
That El Cartel was probably one of my favorite stages that I've ever run as part of the tactical games. It was only like 2.5 minutes long, and it was that was a blast.
Yeah.
Maybe it was because we were both on death's door.
I I've never had so many people come up to me and ask me if I was sick.
Yeah.
Like, are you okay? Are you dying, Nick? Please.
Yeah, for those that don't know, both of them had like the flu or something, and both of them were on their deathbed the week before that event.
Let's be real. We both had COVID. A couple weeks before.
Double pneumonia. I was dying. I was in the ER like 3 weeks before that event.
Nick was 135 pounds at the event.
Yeah. He kept looking at me and you're like, man, I'm so sorry. And I was like, I am glad you're taking a break. I'm about to die. I think like combined we were down 30 pounds or something like that.
Oh, yeah. It was a lot.
And then the 215-pound axle bar came out, which at that time was probably 50 pounds heavier than I was when I that was a disaster.
On a regular weekend, we're both carrying that by ourselves. And on that weekend, neither one of us could probably get it off the ground.
I went up to Jared asking, like, please, God, just say yes. Can we lift this as a team? Yep. Thank God.
Yeah. The day before I had done it, and I was like, man, this is going to, been a little sick, had a little cough earlier. But yeah, it was definitely, I think that was probably the most fun I've ever had at an event, mainly because to me, the pressure to perform wasn't there. I was there to have fun. And I think that's probably the first event I've ever gone to, and I just wanted to have fun.
Sure.
But yeah, I definitely, the team event's a thing now.
Yeah.
That's it is its own division at every event now, but it is also the team event will be happening.
Right.
Where, you have to be part of a team. And I think that the numbers that we had show up is going to mean that we're not going to have an individual division at the team event anymore. It's just going to be strict team, and that caused programming problems because,
So that you touched on it for a second there about the team division being part of every event. Mm-hmm. What else do we have happening? What's new in 2022? What do we got going on next year?
I mean, obviously the tactical division that's come out already. Then we have the team division. That's, you can put your red dot on your pistol in the tactical division. There is, and I'm not opening the door. Like if somebody's listening doesn't know me, like if a door is closed, you're not opening it. Like if I want it closed, it's not happening. You can argue until the sun. I don't care. Like zero feelings towards that. There is movement in other shooting sports where they're adding dots in divisions that previously did not allow dots. Why? Because they're actually becoming reliable. And people are like, well, duty guns and this. They're reliable. I think that the competition market is the place you put a product to find out if it's reliable or not. There's not too many people that, sadly, just like department budgets and time and all that stuff. Competition shooters, if I was running a red dot on a pistol, I know exactly when that red dot's going to stop working.
Yep.
So I can go ahead and replace it before it's going to stop working. The amount of rounds you can put on a dot now are actually starting to get to a level to where, and there's going to be somebody like, oh, I've had a dot on my pistol for 5 years. Well, competition shooters shoot more in 2 weeks than most people do in their lifetime, right? So the reliability and the feasibility of dots are starting to come to a place where we need to start allowing them on pistols. It is not happening in 2022. So like you can come and talk to me about it and I'll sit there and listen to you and nod my head. It's not happening. All right. So don't start thinking that you're going to put pressure on me by making a post on social media. Like I'll laugh at you. I don't care. It's not happening in 2022. But it's definitely in the conversation. So, we're not going to stay in a stone age just because. So that's definitely something that has been on my mind, but we're going to watch it happen in another shooting sport, see how that
learn from their mistakes.
Yeah. See how that unravels. And if it's going well, then there's no reason why we shouldn't do it either. So, a lot of people think like I've got this thing against dots. I don't. Like Jake knows, the division I shoot in other shooting sports requires a dot on your pistol. I had to relearn how to shoot irons coming back into this sport. Right. So I like dots. The bad news is that shooters that are already at the professional level, if you put a dot in their hand, they're untouchable.
Yep.
right? Like you just extended the learning curve by 2 or 3 years by giving this person a dot, right? Because now the speed that they're going to be shooting is unfathomable to most people.
Sure.
Right.
Half-second splits go down to quarter-second splits or less than that.
Yeah, and I think that it's, way faster than that. You're down to like 14, 15 splits.
Yeah.
Instead of having to realign sights and all that, you're just waiting for a dot to show up in the window and yanking the trigger again. So I think that there's always been an attitude like shooters come in and be like, man, if I could put a dot on my pistol, I could make so many more hits. Well, that professional shooter is going to make all of those hits in a quarter of the amount of time, and they're going to be back to work and gone maybe before you even pulled the I think anybody that saw James Gill shoot his dot this year will now understand how fast it happens. So it's going to be interesting to see that unravel in other shooting sports first. But we're watching it for sure.
So we introduced the aggregates this year, 2021. That was a fresh thing. I think people really enjoyed that. It was a change. It was a mix-up, just like bringing in the floaters. What are we going to see for next year for the aggregates? Is it going to be the same? Are we going to be introducing new aggregates? What's the plan there?
Yeah. So the idea for the aggregates is that it kind of mirrors what the USPSA does with classifiers. If you're not familiar with what it is, look it up on YouTube. I'm not going to explain it. But we're going to be introducing, a bank of aggregates, and ideally, I would say that we're going to randomly pick the aggregates for each event. However, the bay that is available at that event is going to limit probably what we're able to do. So we're going to be randomly picking from the ones that we can do. However, we have some people working on the aggregates, and we'll be adding those over the winter time. The idea is that we don't want people just practicing 2 events and getting really good at it.
Right.
You want them to master the transitioning of pistols, everything that's involved.
You're mastering the skills of the event test.
Right. And there's a logical progression to the aggregates that we have. There's going to be a logical progressions to all the aggregates, and there's a reasoning behind each shot that's taken and distances and all that stuff. And it is truly become proficient with shooting and manipulating your firearms extremely fast,
right,
and accurately. So,
any idea when we might see the 2022 aggregates pop up?
I'll say January 1st, and then it'll happen a couple weeks after that.
Perfect. We touched a little bit on it. Team division at individual events. What's that going to look like? What are the weights going to look like? How are we going to open that up?
I'll let Jake talk about most of it. Basically, each event it can be 2 guys, a guy and a girl. It's one division. We're not going to start making 8 different divisions for that one division. The men's weight is going to be based on the men's intermediate weight, and there's going to be a partner A and a partner B, right? Or a partner 1 and a partner 2, and you can choose which partner is taking which path and which weight. However, there is not really a male weight and a female weight. It's just going to be an A weight and a B weight. Mm-hmm. The A weight will be based off the men's intermediate. The B weight will be based off the women's intermediate. And if you're partner B and you're a male, you're going to be doing the women's intermediate weight. If you're partner A, you're going to be doing the men's intermediate weight. So basically what that's allowing is co-ed teams versus 2 guys, all that. It's like, well, that isn't fair. We don't care. This is your opportunity to come compete as a team, to get into the sport. This is an introductory division to where if somebody may not have the confidence to come out and compete by themselves, well, now you can do it with a friend.
Yep. Right.
That's the purpose and thought behind this division. We are keeping score. We're taking the scores just as serious as in any other division, but there is no male, female, male, elite, intermediate. None of that. It's just a team division.
Yeah. So pretty often we hear, on the Instagram, on the different social media channels, complaints about the tactical games not being like other sports. or not being like other shooting events. Let's touch on that a little bit. It's something that I hear often when I'm interacting with the people. So what do you think about that? What's your justification for why we don't shoot like two gun, or why we don't have the same fitness standards as CrossFit? Why are we like that? Why are we like that?
Yeah. One, judging. Why don't we have the same fitness standards as CrossFit? Judging. I do CrossFit. It's like I'm starting a CrossFit gym. Right. CrossFit is the reason why I've been good at this. I think that overall, if you look at the programming that's being put out by Zach and Calorina and Kempson and Hepner through our app, it's largely CrossFit.
For the most part,
yeah. And they're putting CrossFit movements in there. Like, well, why are we doing a snatch when a snatch is never going to be? Well, if you want total body power and display that and be able to build your muscles working together in a logical progression, that's how you do it.
Mobility, yeah.
But we're not CrossFit, and that's why we're not doing it. And to me, as much as I love CrossFit and it's super fun, I love watching it. To me, that there's a lot of things in there that isn't real fit. It's a game.
Yeah.
Right. And people get good at the game of fitness.
Right.
Well, somebody who's 5'8" and somebody who's 6'1" is not doing the same thing in CrossFit.
Yeah. I mean, weight over distance.
Correct.
Right. And if somebody's moving something a foot and a half more per rep, they've accomplished more work.
Correct.
Right. And then you're judging that based on 1 rep equals 1 rep. And that's, in my mind, it doesn't work, which I have a different way of thinking about things than a lot of people, I guess. But we're not Spartan race, right? To me, somebody that is racing in Spartan can't come up to me and tell me I'm a complete athlete. You are absolutely ungodly good at a very specific thing, which is running, doing obstacles with body weight type stuff. Somebody on the other hand that comes to me and says, I'm a professional strongman. That's awesome. Like, I love watching strongman. I love watching Spartan. I'm going to go do probably a Spartan race this year and be terrible at it. But the strongman stuff's like, great, man. You can pick up some heavy stuff. That's awesome, but you can't run a mile.
Right.
So you can't tell me you're a complete athlete either. So that's why, we're not strongman, we're not CrossFit, we're not OCR, we're not two gun. But if you notice, we have components from all of those things and we put them together.
Right.
The only thing that we don't have from CrossFit is max effort lifts.
Right.
Right. Even in strongman, I think that they'll do max effort deadlifts and stuff, but most of their stuff is just, this is the weight, how many reps can you do?
Correct.
Type things. So we aren't another sport.
Right.
If you don't like it, like, maybe there's something else for you then.
Yeah.
Like if you think that it needs to be more like two gun, go shoot two gun.
Right. That exists.
Yeah. Like that's here. That's an option.
Right.
You can go buy a shotgun and go do 3-gun. I love 3-gun. I love 2-gun. Like, I own a range and we literally have a USPSA, IDPA, 2-gun. We used to have 3-gun. 3-gun's right down the street now. Like, I love those things. If it has a trigger and targets, I'm in. Right. But we're not those sports and we're not going to do those things.
And not to say that we can't pull from those things or learn from those things or
Absolutely.
grow from those things
Right.
and incorporate different pieces of it. But to suspect that we're going to take everything and just become that thing, it doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, no. And that's, at the championship, we had a 2-gun stage.
Yeah.
It was 100% 2-gun stage. And there were complaints, about it afterwards. Get faster at shooting, and if you weren't fast at shooting before and you were thinking you were one of the better shooters, you weren't.
Right.
You were just really good at standing on a line and shooting.
Right.
Right. That's one aspect of shooting that is probably overdone. Right. But there was a 2-gun stage. We got to see how fast you can go and still hit targets.
Correct.
Right. And there was complaints from both sides. There was complaints from the military side saying, this isn't how you would shoot in combat. No, it's not. Like, you would never sprint around as fast as possible, showing yourself to God and country and shooting a target. You would never do that. But if you can go that fast and hit your targets, you're displaying that you have the capabilities of shooting guns extremely fast and acquiring targets extremely fast, right? Then there was complaints from the other side, from like the fitness side of it. Like, well, I'm not a pro 2-gunner. I don't have a chance. Well, you don't have to be like, if that was the most watered down 2-gun stage I've ever shot in my life. That was probably on a scale of 1 to 10, a 2.5
I'll say maybe
on
a
skill
3.
level. Right. And, the only reason why it was a 2.5 is because you had to shoot that yellow target with 1 round.
And you had to shoot off a tree.
Otherwise, we're at elementary level.
Right.
But so we had 2-gun there. Then we had heavy weights. Then we had a 6-mile run that had no shooting at all involved in it. It was just a 6-mile ruck with increasing weight. Then we had a 3-mile run with shooting that absolutely didn't matter because the programming was awful. Staring at Jake right now. So, we had 2 runs that combined were 9 miles. One of them was weighted and one of them was just, with your weight vest. Then we had heavy events. We had lighter weight sprint events. And, weight is what's heavy to me may not be heavy at all to Jake. So weight is relative.
That's a lie.
Right? So if you come up to Zach Rodman and say, here's a weight, he's looking at it and say,
it's a marshmallow.
Yeah, I'm going to sprint with this. And then you go over, and I'm not picking on like OCR, but you bring somebody over from our OCR and say, here's a 185-pound bar. And they're like, are you joking? This is, I'm not He-Man.
Right.
And then you got somebody like Nick, and people look at Nick, it's like this skinny guy, and Nick rips it off the ground and puts it over his head. And, so weight is a relative thing.
Right.
And you have to challenge everybody in their abilities. We got some criticism from one guy who touts himself on his rucking ability. You had your chance. 10% of this competition was all about how fast you can ruck. That's it. Then the other part is very complementary to that, which is how fast can you run 3 miles?
Right.
So
Not
really,
fast,
for me, it's really slow. And Kimson taught me that. But, so 20% of the competition was in your wheelhouse.
Right.
You should be murdering people. And then you go to the 24-minute event. For anybody that thinks that Husfeldstone was heavy, incorrect.
Right.
I don't know, 100 pounds. I don't know what it was.
We put 3 gallons of water in it.
So 115 pounds. That was a body weight. Getting over the wall was the whole second part of the 24-minute deal, right? So now all of these really big guys that can lift a lot of weight, now they got to lift their own weight, right? So you can go and you can start dissecting the competition, but I honestly, I had no part of programming it. I have definitely my problems with some of the programming, which, I'm honest with Jake about it afterwards. Like if you think I'm going and like patting Jake on the back after this stuff, he gets ripped for mistakes that I find and stuff. But I think it was probably one of the best, most complete tests over the weekend. That we've had as a tactical games competition.
Sure.
So yeah, we're not 2-gun, we're not 3-gun, we're not USPSA, we're not CrossFit, we're not Strongman, we're not OCR, but you better bet that you're going to see aspects derived from every single one of those sports because they're all parts of fitness. Right. And I think that this is as far as I know, it's the only competition on the planet where you can't have a gap in any one of those. Right. You have to be able to show up to an OCR event
and do well.
Be respectful at it. You have to be able to show up at a CrossFit competition and like be able to do most of the stuff. Right. You have to be able to show up to, I'm not even going to say show up to Strongman. Those guys would. Like,
maybe the women's division of Strongman.
Prepare for 12 years, then show up to a Strongman.
Right. So like if you put it in perspective, the weights that we're lifting, and some people are going to get mad that I'm about to say this, but the weights that we're lifting in perspective are still extremely light.
Correct.
Right. So I've won the last 2 championships. If you look at my lifting numbers, I'm on par with an elite women CrossFitter. Yeah. Not elite men.
Right.
Like those guys make me look stupid.
Right.
Like I'm not even in their warm-up weight area, fitness-wise. But if you go look at the top 2 or 3 female elite lifters in CrossFit, I can lift about what they can. So that's like me and Calorina. Calorina's super strong, right? Me and Calorina have very similar numbers. She puts stuff on Instagram, and I literally leave to go to the gym, put 5 more pounds on the bar just to make sure I can do it. So I think that, going back to it, weight's relative, and it depends on the person to decide if it's heavy or not. But I think Kimson said it best, where if you think that you're going to come into the sport from another sport and say, well, I did this and it's valid because of X, Y, Z, and you need to change your sport because, 1, 2, 3, X, Y, Z, those are my reasons. We're not doing it, and here's why. This isn't a beat cop competition.
Right.
This isn't a special forces competition. This isn't a SWAT roundup competition. We had guys that were literally at the SWAT roundup the week before competing in our sport. We had guys that have been at Best Ranger competing in our sport. If you haven't noticed, what SWAT does and what Best Ranger does, completely 2 different things, right? Because they have to be. It's the tactical games, right? So if you're in a tactical profession, sometimes you want somebody that looks like Zach Rodman. Sometimes you want somebody that looks like Kempson, right? That can just cover ground with weight on his back, right? So you're going to have your wheelhouse events. But I can tell you one thing, that if you're really good at one, you're going to be really bad at the other.
Yep.
And you have to be somewhere in between and be able to do the things that are on the peripheries, and then crush the stuff that's in the middle, right? And that's what's important to understand. So if you're coming into it and the last time you'd seen a barbell was 10 years ago, but you have a 4-minute and 30-second mile, you're going to do really, really well in 20% of this competition.
Right.
And you might not make it through 2 or 3 of the other events.
Right.
That's just what it is.
So the last thing for today, and it's something that the question that keeps coming up, and I'm just going to spring this one on you because I know you don't want to answer this question.
Yeah.
So what's going on next year? You hanging it up?
Yeah, probably.
Until he shows up at the championship.
I'm already qualified for the championship.
So everybody can think all year long that he hasn't shown up, but just wait. When he shows up to check-in and hands me his gear.
If I'm jacked in October, you know what's going on. I've already gained like 15 pounds since the championship. So there's 2 things, right? I think that there's a lot of people, and it's easy for me to say because I know. I think that there's a lot of people that the validity of the sport, right? I own the sport. And that started in January. I had a ton of success before, and I'm not pumping myself up. Like, I had a lot of success before I owned the sport, right? I bought the sport to keep it going. That's it. Then what do you do when you're in my situation? Do you stop competing, right? Which, there's arguments for it, and I don't disagree with those arguments. The only reason why I kept competing this year is because, as close to death threats as you could get by my friends who are also the top competitors of wanting another shot, right? Like they wanted one more shot before I was gone.
Well, you also you bought the sport because you love the sport. You wanted to see it continue going. Buying the sport didn't mean you stopped loving it.
Right. And there's been some people that have been, upset with calls that have been made in this. And I keep walking them back and say, listen, I got this sport because I loved it and I wanted to see it continuing. And I wanted to have people to have the same opportunities that I had competing in the sport. All I want to do is compete. That's it. I want to be a competitor. At the time, I was the only one that knew how the sport worked because I had been a match director for Tim 4 or 5 times. So from both angles, I knew how the sport works. I had the means to acquire the sport, right? And then I had the business experience to keep it going. And I was the only one standing around that had all of those things that was going to be committed to keeping things going like Tim wanted them to go. Right. It was after the championship last year. We all kind of met at the same place and had dinner, and Tim looked at the TV and there's the F1 race going on. And he said, one day this is going to be that. I don't know if that's the case, but you know, I listened to the things. I know what Tim wanted. I listened to the things, and that's the goal, right? We're going to grow this thing from way more than just wanting tactical games to be a big sport. We're growing it because also I have a commitment to the Second Amendment. Yep. And this is bringing people to that never would have ever shot guns before.
Yep.
Like, how many times this year have we all heard, like, oh man, you know, I do CrossFit and I saw this and I didn't own any guns.
Correct.
Even Nick. You know, the first time I met Nick, he walked up to me and goes, man, I bought this gun last week, and I was terrified, you know, that he was there shooting it. But then walking back to the other thing, there's some people that it's a detriment to the validity of the sport because I am competing, right? I think that it is definitely understandable that there's going to be some people that are going to have the opinion is he knew what was going on. He knew what to practice. He, you know, him and Jake work out together every day. How are they not talking about what the events are going to be? How is he not persuading? How is he not doing this? I don't.
Right.
You know, like, if you think that for one effing second that I would program an event with a 20-second 2-gun stage in front of a 3-mile run and then give us 2 minutes to shoot it and absolutely zero advantage to that 2-gun stage right before it, or running 6 miles with no shooting attached to it. Like, that was the worst possible thing you could probably do to me during the weekend. You know, I hate running, and I was committed to being a good runner. About 3 months out, I ran twice in 3 months leading up to it. It hurts my knees. I don't want to do it. And, but I also, there's still the same guys at the top that want me to compete, right? And I think that they're the guys that know me best. And at the end of the day, when you've been in the sport for a while, you understand nobody's carrying the weight for you. Nobody's running for you. Nobody's shooting for you. And just like we did at the championship, Jake put out, you know, what the events were going to be, then the changes that came to the event, and then you saw the event the day of, and it wasn't the same as either. I think that if you knew, and there have been people that have been 100% critical of me, savagely critical of me in the past, that ended up coming and volunteering, that have done a 180-degree turn on their opinion of it. Because if you saw, and me and Jake, you know, can laugh about this, and Nick now, but if you saw the event written out on paper the week before, right? And then the changes that are made by Wednesday, when we still haven't got them on the ground, then we shoot those stages, change them again. It is comical to believe that if you knew a week before what the event was, that you have an advantage on what the event actually is on that next Saturday. That would be the worst possible thing you could do to somebody, is tell them what the event was, have them start practicing something. Because you show up on Saturday, it's 100% different now. Mm-hmm. You would show up and be like, hey man, you gave me these events a week ago. What's going on right now? You know, it wouldn't be a... And
I would be like, what are you talking about? This is the same one. It just had this...
Yeah. The range owner says that we couldn't do this, this, and this, and this. So now this is what we have.
Yeah. There were several times this year that we would get to somewhere thinking we would have access to certain bays or certain areas. And then we show up and they're like, yeah, no, that's not in your contract for the weekend. Y'all are over here. Mm-hmm. And those events don't even work. I mean, they don't even coincide in the same area.
So, I mean, I think we didn't talk about it, but Reveille Peak, there was no long range at Reveille Peak. Right. And, you know, Sunday I walked up to Jake and I was like, hey, buddy, when are we shooting a long way? Because I could use some help in, you know, that area, because that's kind of my thing. And he's like, yeah, we're not. It's like, cool.
And guys, I'm 100% aware we didn't. And for those that have been there, when you went up to the 1,000-yard range to do the ruck and the 2-gun stage, if you'd kept going up, there's another range that's called flat range that's up there. That's where things were supposed to be. We were told that there were going to be berms put up there. So all three events were supposed to be side by side up on the top. We didn't have anything up there because we weren't allowed to use that. Mm-hmm. And we found that out, I don't know, 6-7 days before the event. It was the week of, and I'm starting to pull things out of the trailer. The trailers were up there, might I add. And no, we had to adjust everything on the fly, where we were going to be, where vendors were going to be. Spectators, the food truck, all that had to get switched. So for those that think, like Jared said, for those that think if we gave you the events the week before, you would have an advantage, you probably would have a disadvantage going into the weekend.
But going back to it, like for the people that are kind of critical of it and stuff, the validity of the sport, there's definitely a gap there, or a hole. And there's other people that want me running the match, just as just another person there running the match. I don't know. It's a lot of it's going to have to do with just how things play out over the year. So as of right now, I'm really enjoying just doing fitness like 2 or 3 times a week and eating whatever I want to. And, I'm always going to stay in shape to where I'm, a 6-month out situation where in 6 months I can show up and figure out who's better than who. But right now, no, I'm not. So.
No, he's not.
It's a 20-minute answer to say
famous last
he's showing
words.
up to nationals.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys' time. It was great recapping 2021, talking a little bit about 2022 and what we're going to do for next year. I think maybe we meet up in a couple of weeks and talk about athlete camp and what's going on next year with athlete camp. It's a pretty exciting thing that we got coming up. So thank you guys all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys soon.